about the Real Resilience program. I'm going to take a second and share my screen, and then we'll kick it off. All right, just confirming everyone can see. Perfect. Well, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's an honor to be with you all here today and share more about this exciting program. As we get into it, I'm sure that you'll also be able to share some of this excitement. It's a unique style program. We're very excited about it and have a lot of confidence that it will be received well. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. We'll begin by showing you today's agenda. This should look a little familiar with you. Ms. Jennifer has shared this with all the participants today, but pretty high level. We'll start with some introductions. We'll look at the program background, goals, and intended outcomes. Then we'll move into the intervention design and core concepts. Then we'll discuss the facilitator's role and some best practices in facilitating the program. Next, we'll look at session structure, group discussions, and finally, practice and feedback. So a few housekeeping items before we dive any further. If you have any questions throughout the training, I encourage you to raise your hand. You can use the feature here in Teams or physically raise your hand. I can also see the screen, your screen, throughout this. But if you prefer, you can write your questions in the chat. We'll also keep an eye on that. Ms. Jennifer will help me keep an eye on any incoming chat questions. There will also be some time dedicated to questions at the end of the training. If you prefer to wait, we'll dedicate a specific set of the training at the very end. If anything comes up or you want to dive a little deeper, we can certainly do that then too. So we'll plan for one 10-minute break, 15-minute break around the halfway point, but I'll also keep an eye on the time if we need a quick reset a little later. So, all right, let's dive into some introductions. All right, so we'll do a round table, and we'll look at your name, your role, your experience in facilitation, and also what you thought that made your last group discussion work really well. And I'll kick us off. I'm going to give you a little bit more information just so you can better understand who I am, what my background is, and what really brings me here today. So my background is in correctional education, career and technical education, pro-social programming, and program implementation. I have a master's degree in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Alabama. And during my time with the Florida Department of Corrections, I supported career and technical education training programs, grant-funded initiatives, program reviews and audits, and the development of structured programming designed to support rehabilitation and reentry. I also have direct experience with facilitation-based programming. I facilitated 2 cohorts of the 17-week 7 Habits on the Inside program and supported implementation of the program at other facilities. That included facilitator support, implementation guidance, fidelity monitoring, and helping ensure the program was delivered consistently. That experience is especially relevant to Real Resilience because this program depends heavily on strong facilitation, as you'll see, and meaningful discussion, participant reflection, and consistent delivery across sites. All right. Well, now that you know a little bit about me, we'll just do a quick little round table here. And in no particular order in which they appear in my screen, we'll start with Ms. Connors.
Hi, everybody. I'm Assistant Warden Susan Connors. I am the Assistant Warden over all the programs here. What is my facilitation? It's one word. It's going to be to a whole lot. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. So I came from Elaine Hunt Correctional Center where I was in the mental health unit. So I've done a lot of mental health groups. I've done a lot of groups in general. And what made my last group discussion work really well? I listened.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Connors.
Mhm.
We'll go to Ms. Durio. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
You did very well with that. I'm June Durio. I am the transition specialist here at Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women. My role here is to assure that the ladies here have a smooth transition back into the community. I do that by providing various case management duties, as well as I do programming as well. I teach a mandatory pre-release class, and I also facilitate a victim impact class also. Um, what facilitation experience I have a master's in mental health counseling. I'm also a licensed professional counselor. Um, and I also have a PhD in higher education administration leadership. What made my last group discussion work very well, I think I have the capability of listening well as facilitating a bonding between the participants in the group.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Ms. Blocker, we'll start with you and we'll leave it up to you to kind of delegate the intros across your room there.
Yes, sir. All right. My name is Teresa Blocker. I am Allen Correctional Center's program consultant. My role as a consultant is.
I can't hear her.
Okay, maybe I should get closer. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we got you.
Now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, we got you.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Teresa Blocker. My role is here at Allen Correctional Center is program consultant. I have been back here at Allen Correctional Center since December. Prior to that, I was at headquarters in Baton Rouge, where I facilitated programming as a supervisor in the parish arena. And I had all of the central region of the state of Louisiana under my belt, where we went in with 7 transition specialists to implement programming in the local jail setting. Before I went to headquarters, I was here at Allen, but at that time it was a GEO facility. And so I had 16 years with GEO, and then I went to state for the last 11 years. So altogether, I've got 25 years of experience with corrections. In 2010, I was instrumental in developing the pre-release program, the 100-hour mandatory program that we use here in the state. I was one of the people on the panel that helped write that. I've also done a domestic violence program and just implementing programs everywhere in every way I can. What made my last group discussion really work really well? It was listening, but it was also networking.
I love that. Thank you. If you'll just pass it off to someone else in your room.
All right, I have with me 7 of the mentors. These mentors have been chosen. They are state certified mentors, and they will be facilitating the SWANK program. How we have chosen to do it on the compound, and I'll just let you say your name.
Hello, my name is Kieran LeBeau. My name is Renee Thompson.
Joseph Serbian. Dale DeCharo.
Jalen Gardner. Victor Love.
And I'm Clayton Lewis.
Okay. All right, well, come up.
Hello, I'm Captain Kayla Corville. I was previously the training captain where I facilitated for 4 years, and now I've been recast as Ms. Blocker's assistant.
A lot more than that. He's a lot more than that.
Oh, I'm quite sure about that. Oh, that's great to meet you all. And thank you for sharing that. A little bit about your background and your experience with facilitation. It really helps me kind of better understand the group and It sounds like we have a really nice group here for us today, so I'm excited about that. And also nice to meet you men there in the room. You'll see a little later on how this program is designed to be flexible. There's a couple of different models in which the program was designed to support peer facilitation. And, it sounds like the leadership there in your room is certainly familiar with the powerfulness of peer facilitation. And I'm really excited to have you all with us today. So that's great. Circling back to a couple of those words that you all said that made your last group discussion work really well. What you just described, listening and feeling heard, engaged, and deeper thought and presence, that's exactly what this program is designed to create. It's designed to have a discussion-based um, mindset change. And really, when those conversations are able to go deeper than just the surface, that's really when you start to see that change begin.
The officers that's driven them, we've had them put them on a Greyhound and we pick them up, so we're used to whatever.
No problem at all. Those things happen. Certainly familiar with the environment.
Yes.
All right. So now let's look at a little bit of the program's background, some goals and intended outcomes. All right, here we'll see the program genesis. And really, the concept of this program was born from a statewide Fathers First initiative enacted by the governor of Florida around 2022. It identified key issues of fatherless fathers learning how to break the patterns. The program's impact was really driven by the discussion. It's not just watching a film and having that film really guide your thoughts, but it's the discussions that followed and, how others through those films have successfully overcome similar challenges. And you'll see a little bit more about that as we keep going. So, what made the difference wasn't just watching the films. It was the discussion that followed. Here is the program development. So it was beta tested in a southeastern United States facility with those ages from around 18 to 24. It was a youth facility. There was 47 participants, one facilitator, and I'll show you in the next slide some of the feedback we got from that pilot program. It was overwhelmingly positive. It really did show success in that being able to learn from other people and apply that to your own life really has the ability to shape your future thoughts. So as we move forward past the beta test and we're looking at current efforts and ongoing pilot programs, this program is offered at facilities nationwide now, at both adult males and youth. There's over 300 participants currently in the program or have graduated, and there's over 28 trained facilitators. So you can see just the impact from those numbers from the beta test to the current efforts, how much it's grown in such a little time. And that's really a testament to how successful this program is, how encouraging it can be to learn from others and have that meaningful discussion to help apply some of those ideas or concepts that are in those films to your everyday life, to your goals, to your future actions. But from that initial pilot, the programs continue to grow, as you can see. And as what started as a pilot has now grown to across multiple facilities. It's continuing to expand, and that growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens when facilitators are able to lead meaningful discussions. This really, the success of the program comes down to the facilitators. But the real impact in the program isn't just in the numbers, it's what the participants are saying. And here's some of that. I'll give you just a second to kind of look through this, but see if you can maybe capture a main theme that's coming out in all of these quotes. Changes are driven by the reflection and discussion, not just viewing the film. But you can see in some of these quotes here, I learned that my peers are more similar than I thought. It allows me to get away from all the nonsense and tap into straight positive energy. It's easy to be a little vulnerable, right? It helps me to know where I want to go. It's opening up thoughtful reflection is what the key is here. So what you're hearing isn't just inspiration, it's people starting to think differently. And that shift is happening through discussion. What you're seeing in these quotes directly connects to the outcomes we're aiming for. So let's look at some of those. You'll notice one thing that shows up across all of these. I'll give you a second to look at the purpose, the facility goal, the program goal. But it's building resilience by strengthening protective factors through film and discussion. That's really the ultimate goal of this program, is to strengthen those protective factors. And we'll look at that in just a minute. So then, of course, the facility goal is pro-social programming that increases the protective factors and reduces risk. And then the program goal is to help participants reflect, develop a growth mindset, and apply lessons to strengthen their protective factors in real life. And we'll look more at what a growth mindset is and how those relate to protective factors. But you'll notice that word keeps showing up across all three of these goals here, and that's the protective factors. They're the foundation of the program. They're developed through guided discussion and reflection. And that's key. It's guided discussion. So have any of you, just maybe by a show of hands or a nod, have any of you heard of the term protective factors? Yep, I see some heads nodding yes and some shaking no, and that's perfect. That's fine. We're going to dive into it a little bit later. We're going to look at what each protective factor is, their definition, and how they can relate to personal growth. But before we do that, let's take a closer look at key components that support these protective factors. Here are some of the intended outcomes. You can see here through this chart, it's behavioral changes, future orientation, social interactions, personal growth. And you can see in some of these descriptions here that each one feeds off of the other. And that's important to note because this is a process. This isn't a program that's designed to one and done, right? This is to support growth. And as we all know, growth happens over time. So those positive mindsets help to, increase determination, right? The motivation to pursue education, helps to improve communication. It helps to build those positive relationships. And you can see in that continuum how each one builds off of the other. So outcomes are developed through guided discussion, reflection, and application. So it's a full continuum, right? We're going to view the film. We're going to discuss it and relate it to the protective factors. We're going to reflect on that and how it applies to your life or how it could. And then we're actually going to practice that. That's what the program is designed to do. So you'll notice that it's not just about watching a film. It's about how participants think, how they interact, and how they make decisions. And these outcomes don't happen automatically. They happen through how the discussion is facilitated. Facilitators guide the process, not force it. And that's a really important statement there, is that your role as a facilitator is to help the participant understand where they're at, where they want to be, and how they can use these concepts through the film and the guided discussion to get where they want to go. So facilitators guide the process, not force it. And you'll see how this applies in just a little bit. And, you don't have to hit all of these outcomes in one session, right? We want to focus on progress and not perfection. So which of these stands out as most important in your setting? What do you see having the greatest impact the quickest?
Behavior changes.
Okay, behavioral changes, that's good. Anybody else?
Personal growth.
Personal growth, that's a big one. Yep. So think about at your facility, what would really help push the needle forward? Which one of these? Behavioral changes, personal growth. I mean, surely you can see how all of these could be applicable and how all of these are, quite frankly, is equally as important because they build on each other. They help develop skills after skills. So now that we've looked at some of the outcomes, let's walk through how the program is structured to achieve these intended outcomes. We're going to look at the intervention design and core concepts. You heard me briefly mention this just a moment ago, but this is broken down in a chart for you to easily see and guide you how this actually works. So when we come into the program, we're going to introduce it. Okay, and we'll guide you through that process as we get going a little further in the training. But then we'll watch the film. Okay, and there's a couple of ways we can do that. And again, we'll break that down a little later as we talk about session structure. But then we'll have a discussion, a guided discussion. Then we'll reflect how that can apply to your life or how it could apply to your life. And then we'll apply that through practices and activities in the participant guide. So the films are paired with guided group discussions, and these discussions focus on resilience and protective factors. These discussions are intended to hit on the protective factors that we'll see in just a minute. And then again, after they complete after they view the video, they'll complete reflection and practice activities to help them apply that to their life. Now, that may be perhaps one of the most important components of this program is actually applying it to your life. You can learn about these concepts all day, but being able to transfer those over to your everyday life is what really makes the impact and what it's all about, quite frankly. And I mentioned this before, we're not looking to hit every outcome in one session. These sessions are designed to support growth over time. They're designed to help start building that resilience, and you'll see how we do that in the next slide. Facilitation connects components and turns them into personal application. None of this works on its own. The discussion is what connects all three. Facilitation brings it together. You can see we'll highlight social learning theory and how participants learn through observation. We'll dive deeper into the protective factors and how these are, in fact, key areas of life that support resilience and positive decision making. Then we'll look at exactly what resilience is, and it's built by strengthening those protective factors. Additionally, we'll look at a gratitude mindset and how that plays a very important part in building the resilience. And then the growth mindset that encourages participants to reflect, adapt, and believe change is possible. So as we get going, you'll see that a gratitude and a growth mindset helps to build those resiliency factors. So which of these do you think participants connect with most quickly?
Productive factors.
Protective factors? Okay.
We'll
Yep,
say
that's good.
social learning.
Social learning, observation, learning through observing others. That's good. Are there any others?
Growth mindset, encouraging participants to reflect, adapt, and believe change is possible.
Absolutely. It's critical to have that growth mindset in order to help build on these resiliency factors. Let's take a look at the first component and how people learn through observation. Here we have the social learning theory, learning by watching. Many of you may be familiar with this term or this theory, but simply put, it's people learn by observing others. Their actions, their choices, their outcomes. And this is going to be a common theme as you progress through these films. You'll be able to see this occurring in real time. you'll be able to see the participants' light bulb go off because they have just watched someone else's behavior affect the outcome in the film. These films provide examples of real life challenges, decisions, and growth. It's a very carefully selected list of films that will help show the participant how these characters overcome challenges and their decision-making process that ultimately builds their resiliency. So they connect with the characters and reflect on their own experiences. Here you can see that there's a link at the bottom. These links will be provided to you after the training in case you want to go and look a little further into some of these concepts. But for now, we'll keep a high level and just, general understanding of how social learning theory is really the basis of real resilience. And naturally, people do learn by observing others. So now let's take a look and dive a little deeper into what protective factors are and what we're building here. So here on the screen, you can see 6 protective factors. And these 6 protective factors all work on their own, but they build upon a general theme. And that general theme is resiliency. So being able to build upon each of these protective factors, coupled with a growth mindset, helps to build that resiliency. So you can see here on number 1, attitudes, values, and beliefs. That's pretty clear cut. That's how you think and you see the world. Emotional regulation, that's a big one. How you manage emotions and respond to challenges. Many of these films in this series has emotional regulation built into them. You'll notice how the main characters are able to regulate their emotion to, further achieve their goals. Next, we have healthy family. That could either be chosen or biological. Okay, it's important that we understand that distinction. Not everyone has a healthy biological family, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, your family can also be chosen. So we want to make it clear that supportive relationships, provide that stability. And it's important because that stability does help build your resiliency. It builds your confidence. Then we see the positive social support. Those are people who encourage growth and positive choices. This is your friend group. These are the people who you associate every day with, who you value their opinions. And it's important, as I know that many of you do know, a positive social support is very critical for growth. If you surround yourself with people who are not positive, it's very easy to get trapped, in that negative cycle. The 5th protective factor is education and vocation. This is really where these goals and purposes and skills come into play. This gives you something to value, right? To be proud of, to build upon. And last, but certainly not least, is healthy activities and routines. These are habits that support structure and well-being. It's important that you surround yourself not only with positive social support, but those people who also help push you in a direction of healthy activities, right? That could be also related to a friend group. You want to, build upon those who have positive routines and positive activities. So facilitators help participants recognize and strengthen these through discussion. Now, you don't need participants to memorize these. You as a facilitator need to recognize them. As you're facilitating discussions, you're listening for these areas to show up. Don't try to cover all 6 in one discussion. Focus on what naturally comes up. Each film may not touch all 6 protective factors, and that's okay. And it's also by design. Like I mentioned earlier, this program is designed to build resiliency. You don't just automatically have resiliency after one session. It's designed to build on discussions, reflection, and application. So your role as a facilitator is to let these conversations naturally occur. It will be evident through the film and through the preceding discussions which protective factors are emerging. Now let's take a look at what resilience is. And here is the APA definition of resiliency. It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, meaning the ability to bounce back from difficult experiences and successfully adjust to life's challenges. Resiliency is simply put as being able to move through adversity. It's being able to cope with adverse outcomes and look for a positive outcome. There's also a video link embedded here. Again, you'll get these links after the training if you want to dive a little bit more into resiliency. But this is the basis of the program. The films are designed to show the main characters go through some type of adversity and build on that and overcome that adversity to build their own resilience. And again, this all ties back into the social learning theory. We are able to learn from the characters in the film simply by watching. But as what helps push that through is the discussion that follows. So now let's look at the building blocks of resiliency. Here we go. Gratitude matters. We touched on this a minute ago. A gratitude mindset will help participants grow their protective factors. So before each movie or each session, they'll be asked to write something they're grateful for next to each protective factor. This helps open their mind up to positive thinking. This really sets the stage for growth. You know, the gratitude mindset enables the individual to look through a clear lens and being able to identify the adversity, ways to overcome that adversity, and reach their intended goals. So another piece that supports these protective factors is a growth mindset. And a gratitude mindset helps facilitate that growth mindset. It supports change. A growth mindset is really about believing change is possible. And our role as facilitators isn't to convince participants to change. It's to help them to see that change is possible. And that happens through reflection and discussion, not lecturing. So again, we're not here to convince the participants to change. I think we can all agree that people don't change when you tell them to. It's to help them see that change is possible. So you're not teaching the mindset directly. You're creating conditions for it to develop. So the flexibility in these discussions is really essential. You're not, having a very set structured discussion. It's what's happening naturally. The participants of the program really guide the discussion. Your role as a facilitator is to help, hone in on that. And of course, this means a love of learning. If you have a growth mindset, you're looking, to be better, to move forward, to think differently, to be a different person than you were yesterday. And a lot of these characters in these films do exactly that. So it's about seeing ways to change and improve as a person. And your role as a facilitator is to help them see that change is possible. So now let's talk about the role you play in making all of this work. Next, we'll look at some facilitators' roles and best practices in facilitating the program. Facilitators matter. They are absolutely the backbone of this program. Without a successful facilitation, it doesn't work. The biggest point, the biggest component of this program is the discussion that follows after viewing the film. So the way you can make that discussion as most meaningful is creating a safe and engaging environment. You already know how important facilitation is. This program just gives specific structure for making those discussions impactful. So everything that we've talked about so far, protective factors, growth mindset, learning through film, i.e. social learning theory, it all comes down to this. Two facilitators can run the exact same session and get completely different results. So I don't want you to focus too much on covering content, but focus on how participants engage with it. If you need to spend a little more time on one topic, do that. If the engagement is there, then that's driving the behavioral change. And it's right there. The quality of the discussion determines the impact of the program. So you as a facilitator guide the discussion, not lecture. You help the participants reflect and connect ideas to their own life. And you reinforce growth, not just participation. It's really about engaging in conversation that helps change the mindset of these participants. So what do you think makes a discussion effective? We touched on this in the intros about what made your last discussion impactful. But now that you kind of get a little bit more of an understanding of real resilience, what do you think makes the discussion effective?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability, I love that.
Allowing debate.
Debate, absolutely. You'll see in just a minute how debate is really an important part that supports growth.
I think that safe environment for people to open up and express their feelings and thoughts are very important.
Absolutely. It's quite arguably one of the most important. You have to set that stage in order to, really encourage participation, right? Everyone has to feel welcome.
Trust.
Anybody else?
Trust.
Trust, absolutely. That's a big one for the facilitator, right? The participants have to trust their facilitator. And you can build that trust, from the very beginning, from creating that safe and engaging environment. Perhaps creating some room rules or some cohort rules, right? Have everybody come together and just maybe list off a couple of common and agreed upon rules for the group. Absolutely. That trust is big. Right. Well, let's move on along. Next, we'll look at some skillful practices in facilitating this program. So here you can see, set the stage. We touched briefly on this. We'll go into a little bit more detail on how that's applicable. We'll look at group dynamics, addressing conflict or sensitive topics. That goes right back to you. I think Ms. Blocker mentioned that, debate. Encourage participation. We all know someone who would rather sit back and listen than be the first one to talk. And that's okay, right? Because people move through conversations and interactions at different paces, but we have some techniques to really bring them into the conversation, and we'll share that with you. Managing the conversation. This is going to be very important to your facilitation technique because it can be very easy for the conversation to get derailed. And I'll show you some examples on how to bring that conversation back to the room, have it be more applicable to the discussion at hand, and also some techniques and how you as a facilitator can achieve that. We'll look at what active listening is. That may sound familiar to you all, but we'll take a little deeper dive into it and why active listening really matters in facilitating real resilience. And then we'll look at some best practices. So these are the key skills for facilitating effective discussions. Many of these skills will already be familiar to you, but we're going to focus on how they apply specifically to this program. The goal is to create consistency in how discussions are facilitated across the program. We're not going to go into depth on every one of these, but we'll focus on simple, practical techniques you can use right away. So let's start with the foundation, your role as a facilitator and how you set the stage for meaningful discussion. All right, establish clear group expectations, right? That can go back to, our first meeting. We can have a set of, agreed upon rules we write on the board. Everybody comes to an agreement. One person speaking at a time, be respectful, whatever that may be, but there has to be clear group expectations for this all to work. Create a safe and respectful environment, right? A safe and respectful environment encourages participation. It gives everyone a voice. As a facilitator, you can model openness and engagement, right? We just talked about very briefly social learning theory. Not only will the participants be learning through film, but they will also be learning from you and how you are able to guide those discussions. And it's up to you to set the tone for the discussion, right? We want to come in upbeat, excited, ready to talk about sensitive topics. We want to be able to model what those discussions look like, what they could look like. But how you start the session really sets the tone for everything that follows. And it's something many of you are already doing, but it's especially important in this program. The way you open and set expectations has a big impact on how comfortable participants feel engaging. Participants decide early on whether this is a space where they can speak openly. And that goes through creating a safe and respectful environment. And that discussion is influenced by how the session is set up. So once we set the stage, the next piece is managing how the group interacts. So let's look at how we can manage group dynamics. So this is something you've likely experienced. Every group has its own dynamic. Some participants will jump in quickly, while others may hold back. Your role is to guide the conversation, not control it. The participants are the ones who are really doing the reflection here. And that means as a facilitator, we're creating space for different voices while keeping the discussion productive. So you'll use techniques like inviting quieter voices in and redirecting conversation, but we'll get into those more shortly. Another part of managing group dynamics is how you handle conflict or sensitive topics. So let's look at how we can address conflict or debate. This is something that comes up in almost every group at some point. A sensitive topic or disagreement will surface. Normalize it. It's not a problem. It's actually part of the process. It helps to facilitate the learning. You don't need to resolve everything. You just need to guide the conversation. You'll see a little later on how we're not looking to solve problems here. We're helping the participants to solve their own problems or help to open their own minds or to help guide their own thoughts. Your role as a facilitator is to keep the space respectful and focused, not to fix every issue that comes up. So we can acknowledge without diving too deep. And an example of that may be, that's a real experience. Thank you for sharing that. Or perhaps we need to redirect it by saying, let's connect that back to what we're seeing in the film. Or maybe we need to de-escalate a conversation. Let's make sure we're hearing each other respectfully. So we can see that creating a safe place for different perspectives will help drive that conversation forward. We can acknowledge those emotions without escalating the situation. That keeps the conversation focused and productive. And when necessary, we can redirect those conversations back to the discussions that are productive. So another important part of facilitating discussions is how you encourage participation. You remember, we may have some participants who are unwilling to speak up. Participation doesn't mean talking. It means being engaged. you can engage in other nonverbal ways. Some participants may not speak much, but they can still be actively engaged in the discussion. And how do we know if someone is engaged in the discussion without speaking? How can we tell that as facilitators? We're looking for nonverbal cues, right? Ms. Dury, I see you trying to talk, but you're on mute. I'd love to hear you.
I just said, we're looking at nonverbal cues, the nodding, the smiling.
Absolutely. It's almost like you can see that light bulb go off when it clicks with someone and they didn't say a word. It could be a simple eyebrow raise or a tilt in the head, or like you said, a smile or a nod. But see, an important part of this is that while others may have a quieter voice, or perhaps they're shy, or they're not willing to open up and discuss their experiences, if you force that participation, it creates false compliance. They may be telling you what you want to hear at that point, and that's not what we want. Allowing choice honors that autonomy while maintaining an expectation of presence. So while you're there, giving them the space to engage at their own pace, that helps the participant to open up. It creates that safe environment. It's actually helping them to model that behavior from you. They may have experiences in their life where, they're forced to speak or they're forced to communicate and it wasn't productive. So you can see here on the right side of the screen, this is, a prompt that you can use, in your own words, if you like, on how you can set the tone for participation. You can start by saying, nobody will force you to share your story, but you can't check out. I think that's important to note right up top. You can say you're not forcing them to share, but you can't check out. That's not what we're here to do. So even if you don't talk, the expectation is that you listen respectfully and you think about how it applies to you. Eventually, participants will open up. And there are some techniques you can use, whether that be silence or active listening. You can help them open up and engage. So it's not just about talking, it's also listening carefully. Like you said, Ms. Durio, nodding when something hits home, or asking questions, right? That's not forcing people to engage if you ask a question. At the end of the day, it could be a rhetorical question just to help them start, thinking in a way of how, their participation doesn't have to be verbal at first, but, we're not going to sit here and check out. We want you to think about the concepts and, engage in the discussion when you feel comfortable to. All of that counts. So again, we're setting these expectations early, and that will help drive the conversation. So now that the expectations are set, let's look at how to guide conversations effectively. Managing the conversation. How you respond in the moment shapes the discussion. Right? Let's think about that for a minute. How you respond in the moment shapes the discussion. That's exactly what we're asking the participants to do. But it's also up to you to model that type of behavior. Sometimes what you don't say is just as important as what you do say. And again, this is going back to the social learning theory. People learn through observation of others. So we talked about using silence. Silence can feel uncomfortable, but it's often where reflection happens. You'll also notice we don't push participants to share personal experiences. We focus on reflection and growth, not disclosure. At the end of the day, it's very important to remember that real resilience is not a therapy session. Real resilience is intended to increase participants' thoughts, growth, reflection, all of those things. So some tips in managing the conversation, those intentional pauses and silence after asking questions. You may have a couple of people jump right up and speak, and of course, we'll use our active listening techniques to respond to those people. But let's give it some time, right? This isn't a discussion that has to be forced. It's a discussion that should feel natural, that should really encourage others to speak up when they're ready. We want to normalize sensitive topics without forcing the disclosure. In a lot of these films throughout the Real Resilience series, you'll notice that these characters are overcoming some type of adversity. And sometimes that can elicit a discussion around a sensitive topic. But really, we can use that to focus on growth and not personal details. So we don't want to ask them to share their personal trauma, and we want to focus on building those strengths and choices. And of course, we'll redirect conversations when needed, uses some of those active listening techniques to help bring the conversation back to us. All right, so now that we've learned a little bit more about how to manage the conversation, let's look at how active listening plays a part in guiding conversations effectively. Now, this is a video, and as you watch this video, let's look at how this is put into action. Okay, as you watch, consider what effective listening looks like and how it impacts the conversation. Effective listening is essentially letting the recipient know that they've been heard through different types of responses, follow-up questions, affirmations, and engagement. All right, so I'm going to play this video. It's just a couple of minutes, but again, as we watched, let's think about what active listening is and what it looks like impacting the conversation.
Now let's explore what focused active listening is all about. This way of listening means paying close attention to what someone is trying to communicate. It's more than just hearing the words. It's about understanding their thoughts, feelings, needs, and values. It is one of the most complex skills, and yet one of the most essential to healthy relationships and connections. This way of being with someone is about listening to understand. When we engage in this skill, we begin by seeing the other person as important. We understand that the person is not against us, but simply trying to get a need met. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Riot is the language of the unheard." In saying this, he meant that when people resort to angry communication, it is often because they perceive their concerns and grievances as being ignored, and they feel desperate to get their message across. Understanding this in others helps keep things calm, creating space for safety, belonging, and achievement. When you actively listen, you show people that you care about what they have to say. This can help build strong relationships and solve problems more easily. So let's explore how to actively focus and listen to understand. First, you will want to give the person your full attention. Avoiding distractions like the television or other people will help you. Next, you will notice the other person's body language. How are they standing or sitting? Where are their hands? What clues does their body communicate that tells you what they might be feeling? The next thing to consider is eye contact. Eye contact is a social cue that shows the other person your level of engagement, interest, and respect. It helps to build rapport and connection with others. It is important to know that body language differs from person to person. Remember, it's essential to be mindful of differences and avoid making assumptions based on your own experiences. If you're unsure about the appropriate level of eye contact, it's always best to observe how others are interacting and follow their lead. Next, you will want to stay calm, take deep, slow breaths, and nod your head to show you're listening. Another important step is to see the other person as your fellow human being, reminding yourself that they also have hopes, dreams, family, and desires for love, acceptance, and appreciation. Next up, be curious about the person. See them as a mystery that you're interested in solving. And finally, consider their needs and values. What might be triggered? What universal needs may be desired in the situation? Here you will want to try to understand what values might be driving the person's actions or words. For example, if someone is arguing for their turn, they might believe they are being treated unfairly. With these life hacks in mind, start trying out focused active listening. If you practice this skill, over time you will improve.
All right. So what stood out to you? What does active listening mean to you? Which of these items here really makes the most impact for you?
Check for eye contact.
Eye contact? Yep, that's good.
So it was important to read body language. People are
Body language, that's a big one.
Yeah.
What else?
See the person as your fellow human being.
Absolutely. That's great.
Consider the person needs and value.
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch that last one.
Consider the person needs and values.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that lets them know they're being heard. What about body language? Do you see this a lot in active listening? Have you had an instance where you're engaged in conversation and perhaps you can notice someone's body language change and you know they have instantly disengaged?
They do this number,
That's a
crossing
good
your
one.
arm.
Uh-huh. Yeah, hands in the pocket. They start fiddling with something on their clothes or their hair.
Or sometimes body language can be misleading because crossing your arm can mean two different things. So that's why it's important to ask questions. You know, if the body language is not representative of the context of what you're talking to that person about.
That's a very good distinction, Ms. Durio. Absolutely. And you heard in the video where, if you're unsure how someone communicates, observe them communicating with someone else. To your point, it may be a natural instinct for someone to fold their arms when they talk. They may just be in a resting position or they may be cold or whatever the case is. They could twiddle their thumbs a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily always mean they're not engaged. And if you have those doubts, just observe their conversations in others, and you can gauge their level of interest in the conversation just by asking some strategic questions. Absolutely. So, active listening is one of the most important tools you have as a facilitator. How you listen shapes how participants engage. When participants feel heard, they're most likely to open up and reflect. So, now let's look at how to use that skill as you guide discussions.
Now let's explore what focused active listening is.
All right. So, these techniques support active listening and help guide meaningful discussion. We have open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. So some examples of the open-ended questions you see right there on the screen. Tell me more, or what else? You might have heard some of those phrases coming out of my mouth already today. What stood out to you? Some of those affirmations. That's impressed that you recognized folding your arms may not necessarily be a sign of disengagement. Or you should be proud of, whatever the case is, maybe thinking that way, or you should be proud that you overcome that obstacle. The reflections really help you understand as a communicator how the other person feels, right? It's a way that you can make sure that you're on the same page. So it sounds like you feel, or it sounds like you're saying reflections are used as a technique to help further understand one's motives, desires, or even intent. And lastly, we'll summarize by saying things like, I'm hearing you say, or let's review what we just discussed. Or what I hear you saying is, and you can just simply reword that in different words just to make sure you really understand what they're saying. But not only is it helpful for you to better understand their communication, but it also lets them know that they've been heard. So simple responses like these can keep a conversation going and even deepen reflection. So which one of these do you find yourself using the most?
Reflection.
Which one was that?
Reflection.
Reflection. Yep, that's good.
Mine would be tell me more.
Tell me more. Absolutely. It's a good one.
Affirmations.
Affirmations? Okay. It's pretty much a compliment to someone, right? Like you should be proud of, or, it's giving them a pat on the back for, something that they've said in discussion that they've done, right? That's good. Affirmation is a big one.
I do summarize as well because that's to me kind of related to reflection because it's basically telling them you understand what they're saying.
Absolutely. It's just basically saying it in your own words.
Right.
Anybody else? So these focused, active listening techniques will really help drive the discussion forward. And it's a big component of being a successful facilitator of real resilience because you'll see in just a little bit in the session structure how all of this comes together. But right now, I want to take a quick break. First, I want to see if there's any questions about the material that we've covered so far. And then after we address some of those questions, we'll take a quick 10-minute break, stretch our legs, and kind of regroup for a minute. But first, does anybody have any questions about any of the topics we've gone over so far?
I have a question.
Please.
It was the six, Brazilian, something about the six, it was like different pillars. You were saying about, healthy activity. Also, if you go back to it, about healthy activity with six.
I will, yes. Yep, I sure will. What you're describing here is the protective factors.
Protective factors, that is correct. When I was first incarcerated, I didn't find, any of that until I found God, a higher power. And
Absolutely.
And I believe that all six of them flow from higher power. If that could be added to it, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly ways that this overlaps, and you'll see as the program moves towards implementation that there's different types of tracks.
I wasn't offensive with that, right?
No.
All right,
Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the protective factors right here. Is this what you're referring to?
Oh, yes, sir. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Y'all, that's good. That's great.
Yep, the protective factors are the basis of the program. We're building the protective factors through a growth mindset to help build resiliency. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, I think we can pause here. We'll take a quick 10-minute break. So let's come back at